Hey everyone, welcome to episode 12 of the Dialogue Podcast. Before we go any further, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to all of you in this growing audience who join us week in and week out. We are so happy to be doing this with you. And if this podcast is for you, would you please like, follow, subscribe on whatever platform you're joining us? It would mean so much. This week, we're diving into the topic of parenting. Kind of a big, heavy one, right? What is the right way to parent? What's your approach? And how do we guide our kids through the toughest situations in life? So I hope you find this podcast helpful, and we'll see you next week. So, Greg Ford, how's it going?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day.
It is a beautiful day.
Sun's streaming through the window over here.
It's been a couple hours since I've been outside. Is it crossed over into hot yet, or is it still just comfortably warm?
Well, I am wearing a sweater vest.
That does change the way you experience it a little
boots.
bit. Is there a reason that you were like, you know what, it's going to be 80, whatever it is, 7 today. I'm going to wear extra layers?
No, I honestly, I had to get dressed pretty quick.
Okay.
So I didn't overthink it.
Fashionably, I love the outfit.
Thank you.
So is it more of just a form over function kind of thing?
Well, I mean, we're in the AC.
That's fair.
I'm not really going to be outside much today for work. So in terms of, I mean, it'd be nothing wrong with shorts. I figured though on the podcast here, some of the folks are on YouTube and they're probably not trying to look at your legs. Yeah, well, they're not trying to look at my ankles.
Well, I mean, we could always specifically ask our wonderful producer Scott to not show your legs.
To blur out my legs?
Not to blur them out, just to go
Savage.
from a table up shot. If you wanted the joy of wearing shorts but not show your legs.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was in a hurry. I didn't I didn't think it out.
I'm not roasting you for your choice, by the way.
You can roast.
I'm not
above being roasted.
What was the first thing I said to you when you walked in the room?
You said you liked my outfit.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, but I think the question was how hot is it?
Yeah,
I think it's in the 80s, which is pretty hot.
I went ease of use on outfit today. I'm like, I am just throwing on one piece, one article, and be done. Like I'm out the door.
Zzz.
Yep. That's exactly it.
I dig it.
I do kind of look like a giant Adidas logo or something, though, in this with the big stripe. Don't you feel like? I don't know.
Well, Adidas is 3 stripes.
Ah, okay.
So you would be like a knockoff Adidas.
Which is what this would be, because it's not an Adidas outfit. All right. Moving on. Couple pop culture topics for you.
Let's do this.
By the way, Bob Bieber is trending on social now.
Oh, yeah. It's taken over.
But it was, people loved it. The number of literal texts that I got from people that just said Bob Bieber and then a laughing emoji. Like they loved it. You were popular.
All right.
So Bob it is. We mentioned another good name earlier talking about a totally different subject, but Ed.
Yeah.
Ed Bieber.
Ed Bieber?
I don't know. I like Bob better, man. Bob was a good one.
Yeah.
Okay, so couple pop culture things for you today. Oh, why am I suddenly blanking out on
Sorry, Scott's here to save the day.
Scott,
what would you like to talk about,
Scott? Edit this. I know what it was. One of them, because I was telling you the Jinx.
The Jinx.
Part 2. Last episode.
Speaking of Bob.
Tomorrow. Speaking of Bob's, that's literally why it just came back to my mind. I was like, wait, what were we talking about? Bob, like the worst Bob.
So why don't you give a little Jinx context here for those that don't know what you're talking about.
So for those that don't know, it is a 2-part documentary about a guy named Robert Durst, Bob. And the first part was a few years ago. Robert Durst is like a multi-millionaire. His family has
the son of a commercial real estate mogul in New York.
Yeah,
one of the 5 wealthiest, billionaires, right?
Tons of money. And depending on who you believe, whether you believe Bob or others, he is either a murderer who has killed multiple people.
3-time murderer.
At least 3. There's actually a 4th they're considering.
Wow.
Or he's just somebody with the worst luck ever, which isn't that where the jinx came from? Like,
I think the jinx came from him saying that the first time I heard it on the show, he said that he didn't want to have children because he thought children were a jinx.
Okay.
Now, I don't exactly know how that ties in with his murdering, but
It doesn't feel like it ties
yeah.
in. But I think that he, he would like to portray it as, I just have the worst luck in the world. Like,
Yeah.
the people close to me just randomly come up dead. Bad stuff happens. And I just stumble on bodies and, whatever. So I think it is an incredibly well done documentary, both parts.
Well, we do know he did admit to killing one person, but he said it was an accident. And he totally dismembered the body.
Correct.
And tried to put it in the ocean or whatever. And the body washed up, and that's how he got caught. And then he's like, yeah, well, it was this total accident.
Yeah. So I don't want to give too much away, because I think there is so much in each episode that's just like, it's unreal how much is packed in. So season 1 was literally a few years ago.
Yep.
And season 1, something that he did at the end of that first part essentially led to a new trial. And
so he's a quirky fella. We'll say that.
That's
putting it mildly. And he was wired up in an interview. He definitely likes to hear himself.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think we want to give too much away, because we're encouraging people they should go watch it, right?
I don't want to be the spoiler.
Yeah, don't do that.
All right.
Don't be the
Sorry, I was about to do that. Thank you. Thank you for helping me out. You're anything but a jinx. What's the opposite of a jinx? That's what you are. You're an anti-jinx.
Honey.
You're a blessing.
I was gonna crack a joke. No, never mind.
Okay.
I'm gonna let it go.
All right. So why'd you bring up the jinx?
So because I think what's happening in the second part now that's airing a few years later. I mean, how often do you see something seasons are years apart? It's wild. Nobody was planning on a part 2, but the fact that he ended up on trial based on something he said in part 1 is pretty unreal. And so now they are following this next trial in this second part of the series, and it's just unbelievable watching everything unfold. I mean, I was saying, you and our jaws were on the floor. I kept like reaching over and being like,
yes,
are you seeing this? What
that was one of the best. So we're documentary people for sure.
Yeah.
We like a little bit of a courtroom drama. We both have, I think in other lifetimes we may have been
prosecutors,
like attorneys, which makes for interesting debates and arguments in the household. But watching law and watching courtroom situations and trials is we enjoy that. And it was probably the best episode of a prosecutor just taking someone apart on the witness stand.
Unreal.
For 9 days. 9
that is the
day
longest
cross-examination.
Wow.
He broke this man down.
Yeah.
And I mean, he had 300 pages of his documented lies.
Yeah.
300 pages. And he took him through every one of them.
I was going to say, he walked him through
it was impressive.
Yeah. So highly recommend it. It's on Max. This is not an ad for Max. It's just, that's where you can find it. And yeah, highly recommend it. Last one's tonight. So go back, you can binge it. But I am fascinated to see how this wraps up. Okay. Next one. The Tom Brady roast has been like a trending topic on social media.
Okay.
And everybody was talking about, it kind of started up some arguments again about who is the GOAT, right?
Okay.
Kind of leads off with like saying that Joe Montana is the GOAT and whatever.
Okay.
I know you have an opinion on that particular comparison.
Yes.
And then, so I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay.
Whether or not Tom Brady is the GOAT in his respective area. And then also if there are any other controversial who is actually the GOAT scenarios that you have an opinion on.
In terms of in any category?
Yeah.
Or just, are we talking football?
It's a free-for-all,
sports?
friend, like whatever you're.
All right. So I can be objective in this conversation in a sense, like, at least the best I can. Like I would have no reason to like Tom Brady. So he went to the school up north. Okay.
strike one.
So he played for Michigan. That's huge. That's strike 3, right? I mean, that's like 3 strikes all by
He's already
himself.
out.
So I already don't
Okay.
like. I've got no ties to the Patriots, New England Patriots. I have no reason. Okay. The dude's the GOAT. It's not even close.
Yeah.
7 Super Bowls. He went to 9, won 7.
Yeah.
7.
That's pretty unreal.
Okay. If you take his, whatever it was, 21 year career, and you chop it in half, he has 2 Hall of Fame careers.
Yeah, that's true.
So if you take the first half by itself, I don't have the stats in front of me, so I'm going to get this a little bit wrong. But basically, one half of his career, he had 3 Super Bowl wins. The second half of his career had 4.
Yeah.
So you compare him to a guy like Joe Montana, and I've seen the stats side by side. Both halves of his career statistically are better than Joe Montana's career.
So then what would be someone's argument that Joe Montana's better? Like, take devil's advocate for a second.
I mean, you could say, you definitely can't say that Tom Brady had better players playing around him. Like, that's an argument for Tom Brady because Joe Montana had Jerry Rice. He had the greatest receiver of all time, arguably, statistically, and loaded. I mean, got John Taylor, Brent Jones. Those guys were, they were loaded. And yeah. Bill Walsh is Hall of Fame coach, just like Bill Belichick, like
so I was
an offensive coach.
I am by no means a Tom Brady fan. Like, you know this. I've made it clear for years, my general distaste. But I think that for me was kind of the point where it was like, man, no, this guy really is the greatest. Because when everybody's like, oh, it's because he's, under Belichick's tutelage and all of this kind of stuff. And then he goes and plays somewhere else and still, is balling out. Like, it wasn't.
Dude, it's okay. You cannot like him. I don't know that I don't know the guy. So I'm not, there's plenty of reasons for people to have an opinion about him personally. But if you're talking about football, clutch player. You're talking fourth quarter of the Super Bowl with the Falcons. The dude basically didn't miss. Mm-hmm. They were down 21 or 28 points, something like that. They're getting their rear ends handed to them. In the second half, he does not miss.
Yeah. He
goes absolutely lasered in, whatever it was, 17 for 17 and 2-3 touchdowns. And when his back's against the wall, he's clutch. So again, that's the type of thing someone will go, what's the difference between LeBron and Jordan? Okay, you're like, well, LeBron, Jordan never lost in the finals. How clutch he was down the stretch. LeBron hasn't always been clutch. Those type of things. Statistically, LeBron's had a career no one's ever had. It's crazy. 40,000 points, 11,000 rebounds, 11,000 assists. No one's come close to that. So, statistically, it's like far and away. But Brady, you can't even say that. The guy's got more Super Bowls than anyone, and he played like an absolute animal in all of them, especially as it went on early. Yeah, the defense carried him a little bit, whatever. To me, it's just like, who else are you going to say? It's not even close. Yeah. So, some people would say Joe Montana, but just put the stats up. When you see what he did, and again, I take no joy in that. I would, I'd have no reason to just be a Tom Brady fan, except the dude's great. Yeah. He's absolutely great. And even like, you listen to his teammates talk and whatever. And of course, you take it with a grain of salt. You're watching, some 30 for 30, or you're watching, these specials on ESPN, but they talk about the dude's meticulous preparation. And even I appreciate the evolution of his career. And you see when he got to the league, he didn't really take care of his body. He wasn't as dialed in, highly crazy competitive and talented, but to then add all of that meticulous preparation,
had a layer of discipline on top.
Yeah, a huge layer of discipline, and ultimately, a obsession almost around having his team be the best they can absolutely be. I mean, you listen to guys talk about, Mondays when everybody has off, he's sending screenshots of the formations of the defense, and they're like, dude, it's Monday, and chill out. And I think he recognized professional athletes have a pretty small window, and so he did the little things to extend his career as long as he could and to do the things that would give him that edge. So I've got nothing but respect, for his professional career, and I just don't even know how you do make a case, for somebody else. I mean, yeah, maybe somebody who's more talented, well-rounded, whatever. Nobody was a better winner. And statistically, he's blown everybody out of the water. Whatever, 80,000 or something like that, close to 80,000 passing yards. And so, I mean, that's like miles, okay, of passing yards. So I could go on and on, but
I think we get the point.
Yeah.
I'm curious, you mentioned like the Michael Jordan and LeBron James thing. I think the argument you brought up around Joe Montana having Jerry Rice, like in my mind, I feel like that is a key component of Michael Jordan's legacy as well. Like he had Scottie Pippen, he had these weapons on his team that
it was also,
I don't know that LeBron's ever had quite to the same degree, or certainly not with the Cavs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the reality is like, you're comparing eras. It's very different. So
the way the game is played,
things are different. The way teams are constructed now.
And that's true for basketball and football.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking like these super teams are being created, and the game's changed a lot. So I mean, yeah.
All right, you seem like you've said your piece.
I mean, I could go on and on. I just don't know that people clicked on this to hear all my sports hot takes. I could go all day on that. I mean, you know me.
I do know that, which is, I mean, it's fine with me. I enjoy your sport hot takes. I've been here for 20 years. It's been fun.
I appreciate you.
Fun fact, I have said this at the church before, but I've not said it on the podcast, I don't think. You have this unbelievable ability. Like I always say, you're a sports savant because you have this crazy ability for memory when it comes to sports.
You did say it on the podcast.
Okay,
you did say it on the podcast.
See, I don't have crazy memory for anything. I've already said it on the podcast. It
was in one of the earlier episodes. You were talking about how ESPN
that's right.
Classic comes on, and I know what's going to happen next.
It seriously is wild. Like it always blows my mind. So that's probably why I felt like bringing it up again. All right, so let's dive in because today's topic, I did tip you off on what today's topic would be. I didn't tell you like what to say or how to prepare, but
you just said parenting. Word. You said that's parenting. Right. So that's a pretty big topic, pretty broad. It is a big topic, but excuse me. Oh, sorry. Are we keeping you awake? Scott, can we get you got a coffee maker over there?
I actually, he was trying to be proactive. I have a hidden coffee down here. I can keep it up here. Right. It matches like the motif.
That's snazzy. That's about as snazzy a portable cup as you're gonna, or disposable cup.
Also, Scott shamed me for not wanting a dark roast coffee, and the fact that I was more of a light roast gal.
How dare you, Scott? Why would you shame her?
Maybe shame.
Anybody who knows Scott knows he leverages shame every chance he gets.
Not too strong of a word because I think you said something along the lines of that you couldn't respect me.
Call a spade a spade. Let's just switch the whole topic from parenting to exposing Scott.
Let's do that.
He uses shame a lot. I know I tend to feel
deep shame
worse about myself the more I'm around Scott.
Poor Scott.
Yeah.
For all of you who don't know, we're talking about Scott Kalaga, who is on staff here, and he is actually the nicest human. This is not accurate at all. Wow. Greg, you feel like I'm covering for him?
I mean, no, Scott is a wonderful person. So,
parenting.
Where were we going with this?
Stick with this. Parenting. Okay, so you and I have had some adventures in parenting recently. We've mentioned before our daughter.
Recently? Yes, we have had.
The entire
there's
thing
a lot.
Been a real
it's been
adventure,
but it's kicked up a notch.
So just some minor incidences recently. So like our daughter is starting to drive. That is, if you want a quick shot of adrenaline through your system, hop in the passenger seat with a teenager learning to drive. Then Hudson decided to split his head open this week. That was adventurous and interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe not fun. Fun isn't the word, but it was an adventure. And then Sunday, after church, we got home and Miles decided to just shave his own head. And
well, he didn't shave the whole thing. He shaved notches.
He shaved notches in no particular pattern or sequence or sense of order, to varying depths, lengths of hair. It was a very free-form piece of art. And, that's just kind of, I think, a microcosm of what parenting has been for us. All jokes aside, for those of you who don't know, most of you are probably aware, we have 3 kids. We have a daughter that is in high school and is just an awesome kid. And then we have 2 sons that are junior high and elementary age and are both on the autism spectrum. And so our experience has been kind of an interesting one, helping Ella navigate her experience as an older sister to them, helping her navigate her experience as a pastor's kid, because unfortunately, there are people who target a kid in that position and maybe make it a little bit harder than being a kid already is. And then some of the things that we've walked through with our boys and their special needs. So you have a smirk. You look like you have something in particular.
I'm just thinking about how much Scott uses shame, but I'm with you. I'm with you. Go ahead. No. So parenting.
Do we really need to switch back to this topic? Because it feels like it's really...
No, I do feel a need to say that Scott does not use shame.
No,
we're being very tongue-in-cheek.
Absolute
I know folks don't know him. He's a wonderful guy. Let's go back to parenting.
Yes.
No, this is,
Okay. So I shouldn't have ever brought that up.
You caught me mid-smirk. You got to just let me live in my smirk.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
I'm so sorry. Well, half the time, though, when you have a smirk, you have something really good to share. And that would be just leaving buried treasure buried. That feels wrong. You know what I mean?
I do, but I would say it probably needs to let me decide if it's appropriate for me to share what's behind
instead
this.
Instead
on
of
the
calling
podcast.
it out. Fair enough. Fair enough. So
I'll try to control my face better.
No, don't. Please let it shine. So on the parenting front, it is something that I think we've had kind of this unique experience of different types of parenting that maybe are not something most people walk through. And so it's a question that we get from people a lot, different types of parenting questions. First of all, my question for you is, if you had to sum up your parenting philosophy, how do you kind of approach parenting in general? What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's seasonal. So I think, when kids are little, the theme is kind of obedience and just teaching them fundamentals. And I think you want to certainly couple your authority and your making them obey with unconditional love. So even though they're super upset, when they're young, that you're making them do something that they don't want to do, or not letting them do something that they really want to do. In the moment, they may not be able to fully call that love, but over time, as you continue to prove unconditional love in every circumstance, every situation, they're able to piece all of that together. But you're, again, teaching them the fundamentals of not crossing the street without looking both ways and all those types of things. And then at some point, I think some of it is dependent on the kid and how quickly they pick up on those things and the nature of your relationship. You start to switch from that to more of a guide that's going from teaching them what to think to teaching them how to think.
Yes. And
switching to putting the question back to them. So they ask you a question and you might go, you know what, I've got some thoughts on it, but I want to hear yours first. What do you think? And so getting them away from relying on you, needing the answers from you, to starting to get them working their thought patterns, seeing themselves as a problem solver and someone who's capable. I think that's really important. And you know, there's emotion with that because there's for certain people and probably every parent in a sense, but for probably certain parents, depending on how the parent is wired, we the bond of our kid needing us or depending on us in some way. Some people really bond through that. A lot of, you know, kids hit you in your greatest fears. You know, your greatest fears, they would make a mistake or that something would happen that would cost them dearly or potentially cost them their lives or do irreparable damage type of thing. And so a lot of times, again, that's why I think parents have a tendency to hover. But I think the more that you can start to help your child develop confidence, self-confidence, that see themselves as resilient, see themselves as capable, I think it's for their good. And I think the world becomes a less scary place. I think they learn from their mistakes. They become wiser. I think the lessons are deeper lessons. So yeah. And when do, you know, I wouldn't say, hey, at 12 years old, you need to switch to guide. I don't know.
Depends on the kid.
You got to kind of feel them out. Like, have they picked up these lessons? They understand the fundamentals. They've demonstrated and earned your trust. And from there, now I think you start letting them make more decisions and guiding those decisions. So I would say that's a summary.
Yeah.
How about you?
I think from the beginning, it's interesting that you brought up the whole, like, some people really bonding over, you know, feeling like their kid needs them and responding to that need. I actually felt really weird about that for a long time because that's never really the way that I felt. I don't particularly like being needed. That sounds terrible. But I obviously, like, I feel very responsible if you need me to be available to you and to help you with that need. But I also feel like probably part of my aversion to it is that I feel like it can become this kind of codependent thing where it's filling a need for the parent to kind of emotionally have the kid reliant on them. And so then it can end up kind of handicapping your kid a little bit from being able to do some things for themselves down the road. And I'm not accusing every parent who enjoys having their kid rely on them for something. Like, that's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying that is kind of something you have to watch out for, right?
Yeah, self-awareness, right?
Am I having them rely on me longer because it makes me feel safer if I'm in, you know, in the trenches with them, that they're not in the big, wide, scary world without me, or it makes me feel like I still have an important job to do here, that you need me, you know?
Well, you mentioned Ella driving, right? That's a great example of where your child's development hits you right in the core of your fear. Because what's your fear, right? Well, your fear is in her inexperience in driving, or if she's not developed enough or responsible enough, she could die. She pulls out in front of somebody, she could kill somebody else, right? So, like, the consequences are incredible. And you know, not to mention other big but smaller consequences of wrecking the car. It costs a bunch of money. Okay, so now the stakes are getting higher and higher. So now what do, right? You're riding shotgun in the car. At what point do you freak out at every poor driving decision? Or what point do you sit there and let her figure it out? Yeah. And that's tough because you don't want her and her inexperience to do something terrible. Yeah. But if I freak out at every turn because I'm afraid, I end up harming her, making her anxious, probably, you know, not develop as quickly because she's freaked out. Yeah. So, I mean, that's one example. That's one kind of, but I think it's kind of a microcosm of all of the other parenting decisions, whether it's dating or career or what they do on Friday night. How much freedom are you going to get? How much accountability? How much are you going to watch them? How much are you going to spy on them? At what point do you start giving them a sense of independence and create enough boundary, enough safety, enough support to offer appropriate amount of protection without getting to where you are over involved and stunting their growth. Right. And that's hard, man.
It is.
It's hard because
there's no hard and fast formula.
Yeah, nothing's
for
a guarantee. Nothing's a guarantee. You could be this awesome parent that just sits there and doesn't say anything while your kid drives terribly, and they end up learning quickly and they don't pay any price for it. But you also could, by sitting there trying to be a hands-off parent, they could pull right into traffic and kill everybody in the car or kill everybody in the other car. So I think it's something you got to always be watching. I think it's a running conversation for you and I. Mm-hmm. You know, we each have our own tendencies. We're pretty aligned, I think, in how we approach. Mm-hmm. Probably particularly with Ella, our nature of our relationship is a little bit different. I mean, I think we play slightly different roles in her life and have a little different relationship, but which is normal. I mean, I think that's pretty normal. But I think it's a running conversation of like, hey, are we doing too much or not enough?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when it comes to that need piece, I have always viewed it, again, this is just my personal philosophy. I have always viewed parenting as my job is to make sure that I am arming you with the tools, the skills to be able to act and think for yourself, you know, as is developmentally appropriate, as soon as you're ready, so that you need me less and less and less, so that by the time, and Ella and I have had this conversation, by the time you go to college, or go do whatever you do next, by the time you graduate high school, you will be confident enough on your own 2 feet that you're not calling me every 2 seconds with like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do next. You know, I'm not saying I don't want her to call me if she needs me. I want her to. I want her to know I'm always here. But I don't want her to feel like she's inept and unprepared. I want her to walk into adulthood feeling like I'm super ready for this. And if I get hit with something I wasn't expecting, I have the mental tools to know how to think myself through this appropriately.
Yeah, so I think this is really interesting conversation actually now that we're really thinking about it, having it. Like, so if you think about and this is going to be a very oversimplification, but the broad strokes of how education has changed in the last 50 years, or, you know, okay. So the educational system I grew up in was, you know, created in the industrial age. The bell rings every 45 minutes, you go to a new class. And everything was very compartmentalized. So you learn math in math class, you learn science in science class, and so forth and so on. And that served the world that we lived in at that time. Mm-hmm. The world we live in now, the information age, right? You're training students to solve problems with technology that hasn't even been invented yet. So you really have to train problem solvers and people that can walk in the room and look around and see what are the entrepreneurial opportunities in this room, what are the problems in this room. They got to kind of be a step ahead. Mm-hmm. And ultimately they do that with the world as a whole. How do we, you know, get out front? Okay, so how do you train someone to do that? And that's where, again, instead of going from worksheets where it's like fill in the blank, here's the answer, you're teaching kids to ask the right questions and to go figure it out.
That's right.
So if you're joining the workforce right now and you don't know how to figure it out, you're not going to be a very good employee. And you can't sit around, look at your employer and go, but you didn't train me. Like, yes, companies can do better and better job of training people. You do your best to do that, but things are changing so fast. If you really want to be a great employee, you got to learn how to figure stuff out. So let's go back to parenting. If you say, hey, here's how you, I want to train my kid. Like I'm trying to remember your exact words, but basically you said, my job as a parent is to train you with the skills and to prepare you ultimately for the world, to go be able to live on your own. So if we go, okay, how do you do that? Well, here's how you change a hot water heater. Here's how you change the oil, right? You can sit down and teach somebody how to do all that. But the reality is the hot water heaters in 15 years
are going to look
might be very, very different.
That's
so
right.
What you taught them is not the same.
It's obsolete.
Changing the oil, okay, at some point they may have an electronic car or something. They don't need to change the oil. So it's not just I'm teaching you how to change the oil. I'm teaching you how to make scrambled eggs. I'm teaching you how to change a hot water heater. I've got to teach you how to figure stuff out.
That's right.
I got to teach you how to
figure out how to change this.
Approach a problem
Yep.
and not just wait on mom to come do it. Not just wait on dad to come do it. Not wait on dad to come tell me to do the dishes or mom to tell me to do the dishes because the dishes are dirty. I start looking ahead at what needs done, right? So that's an area, again, with all three of our kids. But even, Ella, who's very high aptitude, honor student, all this stuff, to where it's like, if we're doing a job and I gave you something to do and you're done doing it and now you're sitting here on your phone and watching me work or waiting for me to come track you down to tell you the next thing to do, I have not equipped you. What you need to do is when you get done with that, you need to do one of two things. Come to me and say, hey, Dad, I'm done with this. What's next? Or even better, go look ahead of what I'm doing and go ask me, hey, I'm done with this. I see you're doing this. Looks like you're going to have to do that next. You want me to go get a head start? Give me an idea of what you might think I want you to do. That is preparation. That's a whole nother level, again, that will serve her in the workforce. Yeah. It'll serve her in every area of her life. So to just go, this is how you make eggs. That's how you make eggs. Yeah, that's good. Cause eggs are still going to be eggs in the future, but there's a lot of things when it comes to parenting to teach you how to think ahead and to prepare you to solve problems that might be quite a bit different. I might, when you're on your own.
Yeah, I think that is critically important, and you nailed it. I think it's not just about teaching you how to fix the water heater. It's about teaching you how to figure out how to fix the new kind of water heater that there is 15 years from now based on just the discovery tools, right, that you've been armed with.
Yeah, instead of just looking at a bunch of broken stuff and going, hey, I don't know how to fix it, or to think, well, you just pick up the phone and there's some magician on the other line that can just come be Mr. Fix It. Yeah. And that's where it's like, okay, that's where I think if you have parents that are good problem solvers and they get used to mom and dad always pick up the bill.
That's right.
Mom and dad always solve the problems. Yeah. Then what happens? At some point you got to bring them along with you and start giving them problems to solve.
That's right.
Because there is no problem solving genie out there. You are that genie.
That's right.
It's up to you to do that. Otherwise you're going to be an adult that sits around, everything's broken around them, and you're waiting on someone to come rescue you.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a huge one. The other thing when it relates to our boys and some of their, special needs is I focused on really teaching them how to do some of the practical life skill things really early. So, you were talking about scrambling eggs. Miles is 9. He knows he can, run a stove by himself. He can scramble eggs. He can make a pizza. And I'm not talking just unpackage a frozen pizza and put it in, like actually do sauce, cheese, toppings, the whole deal. He's able to follow directions on a box, read a recipe, that kind of stuff, which is a big deal for a kid in his situation. Hudson's not quite there yet, even though he's older than Miles, but based on his life situation, he's a little bit different.
And the challenge with Hudson is we cannot default to he can't do it. We got to keep trying to make him do it.
That's exactly right.
We got to keep trying to make him do it, because if you're not careful, you can just assume we can't do it. Well, he couldn't do it last year, but he might be able to do it this year, right. And we got to stay with it.
And I think that is a common thing. And I have great compassion for parents of kids with special needs. I hope everyone hears me on this. I'm not pointing fingers or saying you're doing it wrong, because you already feel bad enough. The number of times I've felt like I haven't gotten it right far outweigh the number of times that I feel like I have. So anything that I'm saying, I hope people hear that first. Let me preface that with that. But I think that the greatest disservice we can do to our kids, both neurotypical and with special needs, but especially our kids with special needs, is we put our own handicap on them by assuming that they're not capable of things. I think you have to keep trying. You have to keep pushing boundaries. For example, Hudson used to get so incredibly overwhelmed going to stores. The lights, the smells, the sounds of people, all the people walking around. It was so much for him. And it would have been much easier for me and much less of a difficult situation to leave him at home, to just grocery shop when you could stay with him or somebody else could stay with him or he's in school, whatever. I waited and I had him come with me every time.
I remember you trying to get him to order his own food, and he
Yeah.
couldn't do it, wouldn't do it for a long time. And you just kept, like, every time. And it's embarrassing when you're like, all right, Hudson, order, what do you want? Okay, now you tell this person what you want, and he won't do it. And you keep trying, and the waitress is feeling awkward and whatever. But you just stayed in that awkward, and you kept getting him. And eventually, at some point, he just started ordering his food, and then he was willing to. It would have been very easy for you to just order his food for him and just go, that's something he can't do. And there he is, he ends up 18 years old, and you're still ordering his food.
Right.
But he had some breakthrough at whatever it was, probably how old? 10, 11,
I was going to say
12.
a year or two ago.
Yeah, 11 years old. He's all of a sudden, for whatever reason, he does. And again, the contribution to now engaging with a person, that contribution to his life now has spiderwebbed and into now he talks to people in the grocery line.
Right.
He'll talk to the cashier, the person that's bagging the grocery. He'll have a conversation with them. And now he's talking to people at church at the door. He's walking through the lobby. He's learning people's names. And okay. So I think a lot of that could be even tracked back to forcing him to, or trying to, keep inviting him because you couldn't force him, trying to invite him to order his own food.
Yeah.
So, that's one, again, for you that would have been easy to just go, well, this is what I have a son with autism. I guess this is what I have to do. But you just kept trying to have him do that. And eventually, for whatever reason, he took to it.
I would encourage parents, if you are a parent of kids with special needs, or if you know someone that is parenting through special needs right now, you can be an encouragement to them. It's okay if it takes a really long time for a skill to get mastered. Please don't lose hope, because that doesn't mean that they can't do it. It just means that the runway might be a lot longer than it is for a kid that is differently abled than they are.
Sorry,
ahead.
because I don't want to miss this tie-in, because obviously right now we're talking about autism, and we're talking about a young boy that for years couldn't order his own food or do some of the fundamentals, right? But when you think about special needs broadly, like if you're listening to this and you don't have a child on the spectrum, but you think about a special need, maybe you have a wayward child that just doesn't obey, doesn't do the fundamental things around morality or whatever. They're struggling in one area or another. You don't know how to help them. You've tried long talks, you've tried giving them space, you've tried whatever, and taking them to church, praying for them, praying with them, asking them to pray, trying to do these things and it feels like nothing's working. I can't tell you how many people I've met who are older now, who had very long journeys of special needs. It wasn't autism.
Yeah.
It didn't show up in the IEP. Okay. But it was, for whatever reason, they had their own set of issues,
their own roadblocks
that played out. And the consistency of a parent that thought, it doesn't feel like I'm getting anything, any sort of outcome that I'm looking for. It's not producing anything, but they kept being loving. They kept being kind. They kept being faithful.
That's good.
They kept praying. They kept challenging their young person. They kept being gracious, giving them grace. They stayed in there, even when it felt like I'm just beating my head against a wall. Nothing's coming from it. And sometimes it's in their 30s. It might be after they spent time in jail. It might be after their marriage broke down. It might be after something tragic or painful, or it might just over time, it finally clicked and they look back and they go, man, I gave my mom a world of hurt. Okay.
Yeah.
She tried and was faithful, but that faithfulness, okay, although you may not see the ROI in real time, often if you stay with it, they might be 40 years old.
Yeah.
And they have that turning point where all of a sudden that investment makes sense to them. I'm
Yeah.
not saying it works like that every time, because there's certainly people who...
free will is a thing. You can't make anyone do anything. That is an illusion I think we live under in parenting a lot of times, is we think we can make them do something. Sure, maybe temporarily when they're a kid, you can kind of begrudgingly make them do certain things, physically make them do certain things, but you can't force a person to enjoy something. You can't force a person to integrate something as part of their life. You can't force them to make certain decisions. And especially once they're out from under your house and your set of rules, you can't force them to live according to something that you've tried to instill in them. That is, you could have done it perfectly, right? If there was some perfect recipe for parenting, you could have done it perfectly, but each person has free will, and so they can go and do what they want with it. And I think there are a lot of parents that live in total shame, feeling like somehow they missed the mark. And maybe you made some mistakes you need to look at, but I think there are a lot of really good parents who did their very best, and they feel like somehow they've taken verses like train up a child in the way they should go and they will not depart from it as such like literal statements that somehow they feel like they did something wrong. No, free will is always a thing. But I think that what you just said is super, super important, because don't lose hope. If you're walking through a difficult situation with your child at whatever age they are, do not lose hope, because there is something really compelling about pure love, about, love that is not conditional, that if you you keep offering that and offering that and offering that, it is a draw. And I think it helps bring a lot of people back from the brink of some really difficult situations. Well,
a lot of times, you give a lesson to your child, or you give a lesson to somebody, right? And that lesson is lodged in there. They know it, but they're not ready to receive it. Mm-hmm. They've kind of put it on the shelf, and they know the subject, but they put it on the shelf. And until they're ready and they're in a place to be receptive, okay, they're really not going to learn that mm-hmm. lesson. And so sometimes throughout the course of life, somebody may be way further down the road, right? They're a full-grown adult at this point. Something happens, and they remember that lesson on that shelf. And the lesson isn't just the content you gave them or the one-liner you gave them. It's the totality of your life. It's the way that you not only told them but lived it. And it's later, they pull it off the shelf and they start mm-hmm. now they start really looking at it, and now they start really receiving it. And so, it's interesting. I remember when Hudson was younger and we couldn't get him to talk, he wouldn't really talk much, but then every once in a while he would talk, but we couldn't get him to even want to talk. We couldn't figure out, because we knew he could talk, mm-hmm. but he didn't want to talk. Right. And we didn't know how to make him want to talk. And I remember the school said, hey, we've noticed that anytime he's engaged physically, if you can get him physically engaged, he'll start. It opens up his verbal. He'll start talking more. Mm-hmm. And so we bought a trampoline. Yep. And we would go out and jump on the trampoline, which was quite exhausting. But when he would get on the trampoline and jump, he would start saying his ABCs. He would start scripting, but he would start talking. And so when you think about that, again, the macro concept being that a certain atmosphere drew something out of him, right? That he was willing to either learn more. Again, even his learning is drastically affected by his environment, how he feels about the adults in the room, how safe does he feel, how does he feel about the environment. When he feels good about the environment, he's now a sponge, mm-hmm. and he's way more engaged. Yep. So when you think about as a parent, even with an adult, what kind of environment That's good. Am I creating, mm-hmm. okay, with this lesson? Because a lot of their receptivity is going to be around what is their environment around you. And that's why I mentioned the words earlier about grace, kindness, security, those type of things. I think I don't want them to simply behave because they don't want to let me down. That's right. Or when they look at me, they're afraid that I'm going to shame them, mm-hmm. Scott Kalaga style. That I'm going to be, I'm this agent of shame, and dude, I'm just so tired of letting my mom down and, mm-hmm. and blah, blah, blah. Even though they know you love them, is that the optimal environment? And if you can get that environment better, understanding what environment opens them up to receptivity, then, once that happens, they're a lot more, again, receptive to things. So I think, again, we noticed that with Hudson on just even like learning the fundamentals,
definitely,
like talking. But I think as well, like we noticed the more that he feels comfortable in his environment, he's willing to learn other things. I think it's true for more than just autism. I think it's true for anybody with, we'll call it a special need of any kind, that they're having a hard time. Like they know better. They've been told better. Okay. You told them 1,000 times in 1,000 ways. So they know what you think. Why are they not taking to it? Even if it's truth, even if, they've learned there's some impediment there. And I think as a parent going, how do I create an environment, not just like in the room, what plants are on the wall, like environment relationally, where they're in a place where they can be at their most receptive.
All right. So I've got a couple more questions for you on this. Number one, I would love your thoughts on the idea or statement of people who say, I want to give my kid everything I never had. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you got to really think that through. Okay. And I understand where it's coming from, which is you want your ceiling to be their floor.
Right.
You want everything that you earned and, the hard way and whatever that they can take from there and take it to the next level. So there's that. I think there's also in something like that, you not wanting them to experience some of the painful things you experience. So for example, if you grew up in poverty and you had to wear hand-me-downs and you were embarrassed of your clothes, and maybe you got teased at school or something like that, right? And that was hard for you. That was embarrassing for you. So now you go, well, I don't want my kids to feel that. So I always want my kids to be proud of the clothes that they're wearing at school, or, whatever. They have something I didn't have. So I think that's usually where it starts. But I think if you don't think it all the way through, you give them everything you never had, but you don't give them what you do have.
Right.
Which is maybe character, work ethic. Maybe now they develop a sense of entitlement. So, okay, maybe you had no choice but to show up to school in hand-me-downs, and then you got made fun of and it scarred you. And maybe you're now in a position, because what happens when you're in that position, often people fight their way out. They go, you know what? I don't want to live like this. So I'm going to work my tail off and get to a better place. Okay, cool. Now you're in a better place. You have resources maybe your parents didn't have. Now what am I going to do about it? Am I just going to hand it to my kid and make sure that they have the coolest clothes going to school? Or am I going to, now that I do have some resources, give them an opportunity to earn, what they have, so they get some of the work ethic stuff. Like, I'm not just going to hand you everything, because otherwise they're going to start concluding, I'm just so great, people are going to hand me stuff. And they expect that pattern of being handed stuff for 18 years
to continue
for the rest of their life. And they're going to find out from the world that nobody gives a rip.
They're not going to be prepared for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So to go, hey, I'm in a position now where fortunately, they don't have to experience exactly what I experienced, but how could I create a system where they have to work for it,
so that they can gain those same skills.
It's attainable
without the trauma.
I want them to be a little bit hungry.
Yeah.
I want them to learn, like, you earn this.
Right.
And just give it to you, which again is better for them anyway. They earn their own self-respect.
That's right.
Okay. So all that to say, give your kid everything you never had. That's fine. Think it all the way through though.
Yeah.
Think it all the way through. You don't want to just do it because you're trying, you could save them from the embarrassment you had walking in wearing hand-me-downs, but also you could end up giving them a sense of entitlement and rob
them in a different way.
Robbing them of the self-respect that they would get by earning it.
That's right.
You know how it is, you go out and earn something.
That's right.
And you get it. That's a good feeling. A lot of
pride in it.
Like, don't rob them of that feeling, because now you didn't give them what you do have.
So here I think is kind of a concrete, like, physical example of that, right? So if you think of it in terms of someone's skin, right? We talk about being thick-skinned, thin-skinned, whatever, metaphorically. If you have scars around a certain issue, and in response to that, you try to give your kids the things you never had. What you're doing is you're trying to heal them from a wound that they never had. Mm-hmm. You're trying to soothe a wound they've never had.
That's good.
And so really you had something you needed to heal in you and focus on your scars, but when you're trying to prevent them from having the same thing, again, if you stick with the skin analogy, right? It's like, okay, you have scars around it. So you're trying to protect them by creating this shield so they never experience anything there. But the unfortunate side effect of that is that they also don't build up any calluses. And so now they are soft and vulnerable in a spot where if you had approached it the way that you just unpacked, which was really, really good, they're not going to have scars around this area like you do, but they are going to be able to, you're going to be able to hold their hand, walk them through it, and help them build up calluses in that area so that they are thick-skinned enough to be able to handle whatever's thrown at them and they're not left soft and vulnerable. I think the idea behind it comes from a loving, pure place, right? Of wanting to be protective, of giving your kids things you never had, wanting them to have a better experience. But I think you're right. I think our job is not to protect them from experiencing the hard things in life. Our job is to hold their hand and walk them through it, guide them through it so they don't experience it alone. And now they feel very prepared for the next time that life throws that kind of stuff at them.
So here's a corollary example to that concept, but that's outside of parenting. So I noticed, okay, so we're church planters, right? Which means we started the church from scratch, not by ourselves. We had a team that came together, and a lot of people have done a lot of things, but to help this church get going. I don't want to sound like we did it all by ourselves.
No, but when we started,
church
it
planters,
was,
right?
Yeah, I get it.
So what's interesting is if you go back to people that in that world that started churches around the time we did and before, a lot of them, they went into cities and they didn't have anything. So they went in and they worked jobs, right? This is what we did. We worked 5 jobs between the two of us. Worked jobs, met people in the city. They didn't come in. Nobody handed them much of anything. People helped them, but no handouts. Well, now what you have is a lot of church planting organizations and entities that want to start new churches because a lot of churches are dying. So they're going, hey, so we need young leaders to come in and start these churches. So what do? They start funding them heavily. So you don't have to go in and work a job. You don't have to go in and really raise. They make fundraising super easy, which I get it. They're going, let's not weigh these church planters down with this burden of finance. So what do? They hand them the money really quickly. They try to remove all the impediments, which on paper makes sense.
It does.
What's the friction? Let's make a frictionless environment and resource them heavily. The problem is when you didn't have to go out and ask for the money, you didn't have to go travel all over the place casting vision for what you're doing, when you didn't have to get up at the crack of dawn and go work, when you didn't have to go knock on doors and tell people about what you were doing, when you didn't have to go build the you didn't have to go through all the friction, run through the sand and go through the pain. What happens when it gets tough? And when it gets tough, a lot of these people who just got handed all this money and they made it super easy, they don't have enough skin in the game.
That's right.
To go, I'm not stinking quitting.
Right.
Dude, I burned out 2-3 years in. Emotionally, I was fried. I couldn't hardly get out of bed. I couldn't fall asleep, and I couldn't hardly pull myself out of bed every day. At one point, I was so low, my daughter was asking me to play with her, and I could not get myself out of bed to go play with her. It was a huge red flag. But guess what I didn't do? I didn't quit. I had too much skin in the game, man. I had gone through too much. It's like, I'm not just walking away from this.
Yeah.
And I know some people who have gone the hard path, still crash and burn and quit and all this. So I'm not saying it's a silver bullet.
Well, also, I think you didn't just let yourself stay in that place, which I think is important to say. Like when you hit that moment and you had that red flag, you went, this is not sustainable in this format. I need to make changes to be able to make this continue to work for my life and for my family. Yeah. So,
but my point is, we in the church planning world, I was a part of a bazillion meetings where we sat around trying to figure out how do we make it easier for church planners. And I don't think that's a bad question.
Right.
But I think you got to think it all the way through, just
Correct.
like if you don't want your kid to go to school with hand-me-downs.
Right.
Okay? You went to school hand-me-downs. You got teased. You had to figure out what to do when you get teased. How do I stand on my own 2 feet when people are making fun of my haircut? Mm-hmm. How do I stand on my own 2 feet when people are making fun of my outfit? I got to go back to school tomorrow. Mm-hmm. What am I going to do about it? Am I going to shrink up? Am I going to not respect myself because people are making me the butt of the joke? What am I going to do?
Yeah.
Am I going to buckle down in these books, go all the way through, get educated? And you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Something was built out of that. So I think, again, it was an area where I was actually always kind of raising my hand in these meetings going, hey, guys, let's make sure we support them, but let's make sure that we let them struggle also, mm-hmm. because that is a gift.
Right.
I look back, I don't know where I would be if I didn't have to fight my way through some really dark days. Mm-hmm. And like you said, hit rock bottom, ask for help, get up, go do the work, get back to work, stay the course.
Correct.
Stay in my ground.
Yeah. I think there is something very important in there that you just touched on, which is letting them earn their own respect. Mm-hmm. I think there's something so critical about having that kind of self-respect that comes from, I struggled my way through this. I earned my way through this. I'm not talking about throw the kid in the pool and walk away and let them figure out how to sink or swim. You be present with your kid's process, right? You hold their hand, you walk through it, but you don't protect them from ever experiencing the struggle.
Yeah, to the self-respect thing, if stuff has been handed to you and you really have been in a sheltered environment and you've mapped all the patterns of that environment, so like I wake up and this is there for me, and somehow magically my clothes are always clean and folded and smelling great, and magically all this stuff happens, and so in that world that you live in that bubble you live in, all those patterns well. Then you get outside of that and you find out that the real world, those patterns burst. Don't apply. That's terrifying.
Yep.
And guess what? You feel small, weak, and incapable.
That's right.
And in some ways you kind of might be for a minute. Mm-hmm. And now what are you going to do about that? You're going to retreat back to the bubble? Are you going to face the scary world and earn it then? How old are you once you start doing that? I think at some point early on, you want to start getting some of those reps of what are you going to do? Switch the pattern up inside the house, inside the bubble.
So here's a really, this is going to be an uncomfortable thought for some people to walk in. But I think that we need to do it. We need to be disciplined enough to do it. A lot of people think, well, I will always be present for my kid. I'll always be there if they need me. I'll always be right here if they call. But what if you can't be? Because the reality is you could be gone like that at any time. And nobody wants to think about dying. Everybody wants to plan on living forever. But the reality is you will not. And you have to take that responsibility seriously as a parent. I think it was a little more something I was aware of from a younger age. My mom lost her mom to a drunk driver, her mother and her grandmother to a drunk driver in the same incident when my mom was 13. And so I was, I think, a little more acutely aware of the fact that your parents may not always be there for you, even if they would like to be. And I think that is a factor with our own mortality that we have to face. I would say, especially as a special needs parent, it's incredibly uncomfortable to think about not being able to be there for our boys. Ella, she'd be heartbroken if something happened to me tomorrow, but she would be okay, right? She would be able to navigate life. But I have to plan and prepare for my boys and for the fact that they will probably need some level of assistance well into adulthood. And I may not always be able to provide that. And so it's unfortunate, I think, because, and again, I know this is not a fun thought process for anyone, but you see sometimes people in really terrible living situations, a lot of people that end up, stuck out on the streets or in shelters in different situations that have some sort of a mental handicap, some sort of special need, and they don't have good support. Or maybe parents have passed away. Now they're in their 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever, and their parents can't be there for them. Mm-hmm. And I think it really behooves us to take that seriously, that it is our job to prep our kids now and not just think, well, eventually, when they'll get they get older, they'll figure it out, or, that we really have to take our responsibility as their parent, that it is our job to prepare them to live without us. Hopefully they don't have to for a very long time, but it's our job to prepare them as best as we possibly can to be able to function as a whole separate adult, and not need us for every little thing. That's not easy, but I think we do need to keep that very sober thought in the back of our minds.
I think also, we were talking about the potential of, if you're two hands off, okay, what happens if I'm riding shotgun with Ella and I don't go, oh, watch out for that. Okay, she could get in a wreck and cost everything, right? So, but me freaking out at every mistake or bringing it up or having that energy doesn't guarantee safety either.
No.
Okay. I think at some point as a parent, no matter if you're the most hands-on or hands-off, there's plenty of hands-off parents whose kids really, the fact they were hands-off in some ways contributed to them soaring. Mm-hmm. And there are others who parents were more hands-on, and that guidance was extremely formational.
Yeah.
I think the reality is, as a parent or as a couple, you have to sort of decide which way are we going to err or lean or whatever, right? So we're going to go, hey, we know, like, we're going to choose to be more hands-off, which means we know some of these errors and mistakes are more likely.
Yeah.
And we're going to expect that. We're going to know that's going to happen, and we know how we're going to handle that. We're not going to be caught off guard. And some may look and go, you guys are way too hands-off. Yeah. And maybe we are, but we're going to choose to err that way because we like what that produces, or the opposite. We're going to be more hands-on. Some are going to say we're hovering. Some are going to say, we're helicopter parents, or we're micromanaging our kids, or too sheltered or whatever. But we're going to make our mistake. We're going to err one way or the other and really think it out. Mm-hmm. Why are we doing that? Is this really what we think is best? Is our fear getting the best of us? Really think all that out, but then know that you're not going to nail it perfectly.
No.
Which way would we rather err? And do so unified. And I think that's helpful.
I think that's so good. A memory comes to mind that feels like an example of some of this. The whole idea of, like, you can't protect your kid from everything in life that will happen to them, but you can kind of guide them through it. The first time that Ella and I ever went out in the ocean to go shark diving, and she first got out there, she was in the cage, she was terrified to come out. And I remember, like, trying to coax her out. She didn't want to come out. She in her heart of hearts wanted to go out and experience it, but she could not step past her fear. And the captain of the boat actually jumped off, swam out to the cage, got her out, and he said, listen, if you don't get out, you're going to regret that for the rest of your life. You're safe. I'm on one side of you. Your mom's on the other side. Nothing's going to happen to you. You need to come out and experience this. And so she did. She swam out. She had a great time. Now, every time we ever go out there, she's the first one in the water. I mean, aside from the safety diver, she's the first one in. Throw on her flippers and go. And I think kind of the example in that is that, life is a little bit shark-infested waters, right? There are always going to be things that you can't control. You can't control what a shark is going to do. But you can minimize your risk. You can teach your kid how to exist safely in the world, with best practices to the best of their ability, how to manage their fear, how to handle themselves. And then I think helping your kids, our job is to help them know, I'm on either side of you. I'm going to walk with you through this. You can do it. And they go face fears. They go face tough situations in life with you by their side, not alone. And eventually they get to the point where, as you said, they do earn their own respect. There is a level of dignity there in, I faced it, and now I feel confident to go face it by myself over and over again.
And at some point, they're taking it on without you by their side. You're across the country on the phone going, I believe in you. You can
That's
do
exactly
it.
right.
I believe in you. You can do it. Again, recognizing that season, recognizing that that's the support they need is for you to go, look how many things you've done.
Yeah.
Look how many things. You swam with sharks, man. You've done this. You've taken that on. You bounced back from this. You got this. And I'm not next to you this time.
Yep.
But you don't need me. You can do it.
I have to say, I'm so incredibly thankful that I've gotten to do parenting with you, because I think you are so insightful. You have such good instincts around when to be hands-on, when to be hands-off, how to ask good questions that help guide, especially for Ella. You are really good at helping guide her through those critical thinking processes to be able to earn her own respect and to be able to handle problems on her own. And you're present, and things can be bounced off of you at any time, but you can walk in there and you can handle this yourself. You can have these tough conversations yourself. You can, and so I just want to say thank you. I have absolutely loved taking that journey with you. I think you're a phenomenal parent, and it's been fun.
Well, that's quite the compliment, and I appreciate you saying that. That means a lot, and the feelings are mutual. I appreciate you as well. You're an amazing mom, and with the spectrum that you are trying to lead and guide and hold together, and when a lot of the stuff that you're doing doesn't have this immediate result, you don't get to taste the fruit of your labor, and then every once in a while it's this breakthrough. And it's, even though you have faith that it's going to break through, it still feels like a surprise. Like, dude, he talked to the cashier today. It was amazing. And now he's talking to now he's talking to people all over the place. And now we got to go, how do we make sure he doesn't just go up and hug strangers, Right. But your consistency and your willingness to stay present, stay connected, and, fight through the things in your own head and heart, so that you could, be an amazing mom. To me, those are heroic things, and I wouldn't want to do this without you, that's for sure. So thank you.
Well, you make me teary-eyed every time you talk to me about that stuff, so we're going to go ahead and end the episode.
It'd be a good time to end.
All right, love you.
You cry, I'll go eat lunch, and or you can cry while I eat. It'll be great.
It'll be great. All right.
We'll both have our needs met. I love you.
Bye.